The Winged Death by H.P. Lovecraft with Hazel Heald. The Orange Hotel stands in High Street near the railway station in Bloemfontein, South Africa. On Sunday, January 24th, 1932, 4 men sat shivering from terror in a room on its 3rd floor. One was George C. Titteridge, proprietor of the hotel. Another was Police Constable Ian DeWitt of the Central Station. A third was Johannes Bogaert, the local coroner. The fourth, and apparently the least disorganized of the group, was Dr. Cornelius Van Heulen, the coroner's physician. On the floor, uncomfortably evident amidst the stifling summer heat, was the body of a dead man. But this was not what the 4 men were afraid of. Their glances wandered from the table, on which lay a curious assortment of things, to the ceiling overhead, across whose smooth whiteness a series of huge, faltering, alphabetical characters had somehow been scrawled in ink, and every now and then Dr. Van Heulen would glance half furtively at the worn leather blank book which he held in his left hand. The horror of the 4 men seemed about equally divided among the blank book, the scrawled words on the ceiling, and a dead fly of peculiar aspect which floated in a bottle of ammonia on the table. Also on the table were an open inkwell, a pen and writing paper, a physician's medical case, a bottle of hydrochloric acid, and a tumbler about a quarter full of black oxide of manganese. The worn leather book with the journal of the dead man on the floor, and had at once made it clear that the name Frederick N. Mason, Mining Properties, Toronto, Canada, signed in the motel register was a false one. There were other things, terrible things, which it likewise made clear, and still other things of far greater terror at which it hinted hideously without making them clear or even fully believable. It was the half-belief of the 4 men, fostered by lives spent close to the black, settled secrets of brooding Africa, which made them shiver so violently in spite of the searing January heat. The blank book was not a large one, and the entries were in a fine handwriting, which, however, grew careless and nervous looking towards the last. It consisted of a series of jottings, at first rather irregularly spaced, but finally becoming daily. To call it a diary would not be quite correct, for it chronicled only one set of its writer's activities. Dr. Van Heulen recognized the name of the dead man the moment he opened the cover, for it was that of an eminent member of his own profession who had been largely connected with African matters. In another moment he was horrified to find this name linked with a dastardly crime, officially unsolved, which had filled the newspaper some 4 months before. And the farther he read, the deeper grew his horror, awe, and sense of loathing and panic. Here, in essence, is the text which the doctor read aloud in that sinister and increasingly noisome room, while the 3 men around him breathed hard, fidgeted in their chairs, and darted frightened glances at the ceiling, the table, the thing on the floor, and one another. Journal of Thomas Slounwood, M.D. Touching Punishment of Henry Sargent Moore, Ph.D., of Brooklyn, New York, Professor of Invertebrate Biology in Columbia University, New York, New York. Prepared to be read after my death for the satisfaction of making public the accomplishment of my revenge, which may otherwise never be imputed to me even if it succeeds. January 5th, 1929. I have now fully resolved to kill Dr. Henry Moore, and a recent incident has shown me how I shall do it. From now on, I shall follow a consistent line of action, hence the beginning of this journal. It is hardly necessary to repeat the circumstances which have driven me to this course, for the informed part of the public is familiar with all the salient facts. I was born in Trenton, New Jersey on April 12, 1885, the son of Dr. Paul Slounwood, formerly of Pretoria, Transvaal, South Africa. Studying medicine as part of my family tradition, I was led by my father, who died in 1916 while I was serving in France in a South African regiment, to specialize in African fevers, and after my graduation from Columbia, spent much time in researches which took me from Durban in Natal up to the equator itself. In Mombasa, I worked out my new theory of transmission and development of remittent fever, aided only slightly by the papers of the late government physician Sir Norman Sloane, which I found in the house I occupied. When I published my results, I became, at a single stroke, a famous authority. I was told of the probability of an almost supreme position in the South African Health Service, and even a probable knighthood in the event of my becoming a naturalized citizen, and accordingly, I took the necessary steps. Then occurred the incident for which I am about to kill Henry Moore. This man, my classmate and friend for years in America and Africa, chose deliberately to undermine my claim to my own theory, alleging that Sir Norman Sloane had anticipated me in every essential detail, and implying that I had probably found more of his papers than I had stated in my account of the matter. To buttress this absurd accusation, he produced certain personal letters from Sir Norman, which indeed showed that the older man had been over my ground, and that he would have published his results very soon but for his sudden death. This much I could only admit with regret. What I could not excuse was the jealous suspicion that I had stolen this theory from Sir Norman's papers. The British government, sensibly enough, ignored these aspersions, but withheld the half-promised appointment and knighthood on the ground that my theory, while original with me, was not in fact new. I could soon see that my career in Africa was perceptibly checked, though I had placed all my hopes in such a career, even to the point of resigning American citizenship. A distinct coolness towards me had arisen among the government set in Mombasa, especially among those who had known Sir Norman. It was then that I resolved to be even with Moore sooner or later, though I did not know how. He had been jealous of my early celebrity, and had taken advantage of his old correspondence with Sir Norman to ruin me. This from the friend whom I had myself led to take an interest in Africa, whom I had coached and inspired till he achieved his present moderate fame as an authority on African entomology. Even now, though I will not deny that his attainments are profound, I made him, and in return he has ruined me. Now, some day, I shall destroy him. When I saw myself losing ground in Mombasa, I applied for my present situation in the interior at Magonga, only 50 miles from the Uganda line. It is a cotton and ivory trading post, with only 8 white men besides myself. A beastly hole almost on the equator, and full of every sort of fever known to mankind. Poisonous snakes and insects everywhere, and black men with diseases nobody ever heard of outside medical college. But my work is not hard, and I have always had plenty of time to plan things to do to Henry Moore. It amuses me to give his Diptera of Central and South Africa a prominent place on my shelf. I suppose it actually is a standard manual. They use it at Columbia, Harvard, and the U of Wiz. But my own suggestions are really responsible for half its strong points. Last week I encountered the thing which decided me how to kill Moore. A party from Uganda brought in a black with a queer illness which I can't yet diagnose. He was lethargic, with a very low temperature, and shuffled in a peculiar way. Most of the others were afraid of him, and said he was under some kind of witch doctor spell. But Gobo, the interpreter, said he had been bitten by an insect. What it was, I can't imagine, for there is only a slight puncture on the arm. It is a bright red, though with a purple ring around it. Spectral looking. I don't wonder the boys lay it to black magic. They seem to have seen cases like it before and say there's really nothing to do about it. Old Nakuru, one of the gala boys at the post, says it must be the bite of a devilfly, which makes its victims waste away gradually and die, then takes hold of his soul and personality, if it is still alive itself, flying around with all his likes, dislikes, and consciousness. A queer legend, and I don't know of any local insect deadly enough to account for it. I gave his sick black, his name is Mavina, a good shot of quinine, and took a sample of his blood for testing, but haven't made much progress. There's certainly a strange germ present, but I can't remotely identify it. The nearest thing to it is the bacillus one finds in oxen, horses, and dogs, that the tsetse fly has bitten. But tsetse flies don't infect human beings, and this is too far north for them anyway. However, the important thing is that I've decided how to kill Moore. If this interior region has insects as poisonous as the natives say, I'll see that he gets a shipment of them from a source he won't suspect, and with plenty of assurances that they are harmless. Trust him to throw overboard all caution when it comes to studying an unknown species, and then we'll see how nature takes its course. It ought not to be hard to find an insect that scares the blacks so much. First to see how poor Mavina turns out, then to find my envoy of death. January 7th. Mavana is no better, though I have injected all the antitoxins I know of. He has fits of trembling, in which he rants affrightedly about the way his soul will pass when he dies into the insect that bit him, but between them, he remains in a kind of half stupor. Heart action still strong, so I may pull him through. I shall try to, for he can probably guide me better than anyone else to the region where he was bitten. Meanwhile, I'll write to Dr. Lincoln, my predecessor here, for Allen, the head factor, says he had a profound knowledge of the local sicknesses. He ought to know about the death fly, if any white man does. He's at Narbo now, and the Black Runners ought to get me a reply in a week, using the railway for half the trip. January 10th. Patient unchanged, but I have found what I want. It was an old volume of the local health records, which I've been going over diligently while waiting to hear from Lincoln. 30 years ago, there was an epidemic that killed off thousands of natives in Uganda, and it was definitely traced to a rare fly called Glossina palpalis, a sort of cousin to the Glossina marcescens or cc. It lives in the bushes on the shores of lakes and rivers, and feeds on the blood of crocodiles, antelopes, and large mammals. When these food animals have the germ of trypanosomiasis, or sleeping sickness, it picks it up and develops acute infectivity after an incubation period of 31 days. Then for 75 days, it is sure death to anyone or anything it bites. Without a doubt, this must be the devil fly the black men talk about. Now I know what I'm heading for. Hope Mavana pulls through. Ought to hear from Lincoln in 4 or 5 days. He has a great reputation for success in things like this. My worst problem will be to get the flies to Moore without his recognizing them. With his cursed plodding scholarship, it would be just like him to know all about them since they're actually on record. January 15th. Just heard from Lincoln, who confirms all that the records say about Glossina palpalis. He has a remedy for sleeping sickness, which has succeeded in a great number of cases when not given too late. Intramuscular injections of triparacetamide. Since Mavana was bitten about 2 months ago, I don't know how it will work. But Lincoln says that cases have been known to drag on 18 months, so possibly I'm not too late. Lincoln sent over some of his stuff, so I've just given Mavana a stiff shot. In a stupor now. They've brought his principal wife from the village, but he doesn't even recognize her. If he recovers, he can certainly show me where the flies are. He's a great crocodile hunter, according to the report, and knows all Uganda like a book. I'll give him another shot tomorrow. January 16th. Mavana seems a little brighter today, but his heart action is slowing up a bit. I'll keep up the injections, but not overdo them. January 17th. Recovery really pronounced today. Mavana opened his eyes and showed signs of actual consciousness, though dazed after the injection. Hope Moore doesn't know about the triparacetamide. There's a good chance he won't, since he never learned much towards medicine. Mavana's tongue seemed paralyzed, but I fancy that will pass off if I can only wake him. Wouldn't mind a good sleep myself, but not of this kind. January 25th. Mavana nearly cured. In another week I can let him take me into the jungle. He was frightened when he first came to, about having the fly take his personality after he died, but brightened up finally when I told him he was going to get well. His wife, Ugowe, takes good care of him now, and I can rest a bit. Then for the envoys of death. February 3rd. Mavana is well now, and I have talked with him about a hunt for flies. He dreads to go near the place where they got him, but I'm playing on his gratitude. Besides, he has an idea that I can ward off disease as well as cure it. His pluck would shame a white man. There's no doubt he'll go. I can get off by telling the head factor the trip is an interest of local health work. March 12th. In Uganda at last. Have 5 boys beside Mavana, but they're all galas. The local blacks couldn't be hired to come near the region after the talk of what had happened to Mavana. This jungle is a pestilent place, steaming with miasma vapors. All the lakes look stagnant. In one spot, we came upon a trace of Calliopean ruins, which made even the gallows run past in a wide circle. They say these megaliths are older than man, and that they used to be a haunt or outpost of the fishers from outside, whatever that means, and of the evil gods Tsagwa and Klu. To this day, they are said to have a malign influence, and to be connected somehow with the devil flies. March 15th. Struck Lake Malolo this morning, where Mavana was bitten, a hellish green scummed affair full of crocodiles. Mavana has fixed up a fly trap of fine wire netting baited with crocodile meat. It has a small entrance, and once the quarry get in, they don't know how to get out. As stupid as they are deadly and ravenous for fresh meat or a bowl of blood. Hope we can get a good supply. I've decided that I must experiment with them, finding a way to change their appearance so that more won't recognize them. Possibly I can cross them with some other species, producing a strange hybrid whose infection-carrying capacity will be undiminished. We'll see. I must wait, but I am in no hurry now. When I get ready, I'll make Mavana get some infected meat to feed my envoys of death. And then, for the post office, ought to be no trouble getting infection, for this country is a veritable pest hole. March 16th. Good luck. 2 cages full, 5 vigorous specimens with wings glistening like diamonds. Mavana is emptying them into a large can with a tightly meshed top, and I think we caught them in the nick of time. We can get them to Magongon without trouble, taking plenty of crocodile meat for their food. Undoubtedly, all or most of it is infected. April 20th. Back at Magongon and busy in the laboratory. Have sent to Dr. Juice in Pretoria for some CC flies for hybridization experiments. Such a crossing, if it will work at all, ought to produce something pretty hard to recognize, yet at the same time just as deadly as the Palpalas. If this doesn't work, I shall try certain other diphtheria from the interior, and I have sent to Dr. Vandervelde at Nyangui for some of the Congo types. I can't have to send Mavana for more tainted meat after all, for I find I can keep cultures of the germ Trypanosis gambian taken from the meat we got last month, almost indefinitely in tubes. When the time comes, I'll taint some fresh meat and feed my winged envoys a good dose. Then bon voyage to them. June 18th. My CC flies from Juice came in today. Cages for breeding were all ready long ago, and I am now making selections. Intend to use ultraviolet rays to speed up the life cycle. Fortunately, I have the needed apparatus in my regular equipment. Naturally, I tell no one what I'm doing. The ignorance of the few men here makes it easy for me to conceal my aims and pretend to be merely studying the existing species for medical reasons. June 29th. The crossing is fertile. Good deposits of eggs last Wednesday, and now I have some excellent larvae. If the mature insects look as strange as these do, I need do nothing more. I'm preparing separate numbered cages for the different specimens. July 7th. New hybrids are out. Disguise is excellent as to shape, but sheen of wings still suggests Palpalis. Thorax has faint suggestion of the stripes of the CC, slight variation in individuals. I'm feeding them all on tainted crocodile meat, and after infectivity develops, we'll try them on some of the blacks. Apparently, of course, by accident. There are so many mildly venomous flies around here that it can easily be done without exciting suspicion. I shall loose an insect in my tightly screwed dining room when Bata, my houseboy, brings in breakfast, keeping well on guard myself. When it has done its work, I'll capture it or swat it, an easy thing because of its stupidity, or asphyxiate it by filling the room with chlorine gas. If it doesn't work the first time, I'll try again until it does. Of course, I'll have the trypsamide handy in case I get bitten myself, but I shall be careful to avoid biting, for no antidote is really certain. August 10th. Infectivity mature and managed to get Bata stung in fine shape. Cut the fly on him, returned it to its cage, eased up the pain with iodine, and the poor devil is quite grateful for the service. He'll try a variant specimen on Gamba and Factor's messenger tomorrow. That will be all the tests I shall dare to make here, but if I need more, I shall take some specimens to Yukala and get additional data. August 11th. Failed to get Gamba, but recapture the fly alive. Bada still seems as well as usual and has no pain in the back where he was stung. Shall wait before trying to get Gamba again. August 14th. Shipment of insects from Vandervelde at last. Fully 7 distinct species, some more or less poisonous. Am keeping them well fed in case the CC crossing doesn't work. Some of these fellows look very unlike the Papalis, but the trouble is that they may not make a fertile cross with it. August 17th. Got Gamba this afternoon, but had to kill the fly on him. It nipped him in the left shoulder. I dressed the bite, and Gamba is as grateful as Bata was. No change in Bata. August 20th. Gamba unchanged so far. Bata too. I'm experimenting with a new form of disguise to supplement the hybridization, some sort of dye to change the telltale glitter of the Papalis wings. A bluish tint would be best, something I could spray on a whole batch of insects. Shall begin with investigating things like Prussian or Turnbull's blue, iron and cyanogen salts. August 25th. Bata complained of a pain in his back today. Things may be developing. September 3rd. Have made fair progress in the experiments. Bata shows signs of lethargy and says his back aches all the time. Gamba began to feel uneasy in his bitten shoulder. September 24th. Bata worse and worse, beginning to get frightened about his bite. Thinks it must be a devil fly, and entreated me to kill it, for he saw me cage it. Until I pretended to him that it had died long ago. Said he didn't want his soul to pass into it upon his death. I give him shots of plain water with hyperdemic to keep his morale up. Evidently, the fly retains all the properties of Papalis. Gamba down too, and repeating all of Bata's symptoms. I may decide to give him a chance with tripceramide, for the effect of the fly is proved well enough. I shall let Bata go on, however, for I want a rough idea of how long it takes to finish a case. Dye experiments coming along finely. An isomeric form of ferrous furoncide with some admixture of potassium salts can be dissolved in alcohol and sprayed on the insects, with splendid effects. It stains the wings blue without affecting the dark thorax much, and doesn't wear off when a sprinkling of specimens with water. With this disguise, I think I can use the present CC hybrids and avoid bothering with any more experiments. Sharp as he is, Moore couldn't recognize the blue-winged fly with a half CC thorax. Of course, I keep all this dye business strictly undercover. Nothing must ever connect me with the blue flies later on. October 9th. Bata is lethargic and is taken to his bed, having given Gamba tripceramide for 2 weeks, and fancy he'll recover. October 25th. Bata very low, but Gamba nearly well. November 18th. Bata died yesterday, and a curious thing happened which gave me a real shiver in view of the native legends and Bata's own fears. When I returned to the laboratory after the death, I heard the most singular buzzing and thrashing in cage 12, which contained the fly that bit Bata. The creature seemed frantic, but it stopped still when I appeared, lighting on the wire netting and looking at me in the oddest way. It reached its legs through the wires as if it were bewildered. When I came back from dining with Alan, the thing was dead. Evidently it had gone wild and beat its life out on the side of the cage. It certainly is peculiar that this should happen just as Bata died. When Black had seen it, he laid it at once to the absorption of the poor devil's soul. I shall start my blue-stained hybrids on their way before long. The hybrid's rate of killing seems a little ahead of the pure Papalis rate. If anything, Bata died 3 months and 8 days after infection. But of course, there's always a wide margin of uncertainty. I almost wish I had let Gamba's case run on. December 5th. Busy planning on how to get the envoys to Moore. I must have them appear to come from some disinterested entomologist who has read Diperta of Central South Africa and believes he would like to study this new and unidentified species. There must also be ample assurances that the blue-winged fly is harmless, provided by the natives' long experience. Moore will be off his guard, and one of the flies will surely get him sooner or later, though one can't tell just when. I'll have to rely on the letters of New York friends. They still speak of Moore from time to time to keep me informed of early results, though I dare say the papers will announce his death. Above all, I must show no interest in the case. I shall mail the flies while on a trip. but must not be recognized when I do it. The best plan will be to take a long vacation in the interior, grow a beard, mail the package at Ucala while passing as a visiting entomologist, and return here after shaving off the beard. April 12th, 1930. Back in Magongad after my long trip. Everything has come off finely, with clockwork precision. Have sent the flies to Moore without leaving a trace. Got a Christmas vacation December 15th, and set out at once with the proper stuff. Made a very good mailing container with room to include some germ-tainted crocodile meat as food for the envoys. By the end of February, I had beard enough to shape into a close Van Dyke. Showed up at Ucala, March 9th, and typed a letter to Moore on the trading post machine. Signed it Neville Wayland Hall. Supposed to be an entomologist from London. I think I took just the right tone. Interest of a brother scientist and all that. Was artistically casual in emphasizing the complete harmlessness of the specimens. Nobody suspected anything. Shaved the beard as soon as I hit the bush so that there wouldn't be any uneven tanning by the time I got back. Dispensed with native bearers except for one small stretch of swamp. I can do wonders with one knapsack, and my sense of direction is good. Lucky I'm used to such traveling, explaining my protracted absence by pleading a touch of fever and some mistakes in direction when going through the bush. But now comes the hardest part psychologically, waiting for news of Moore without showing the strain. Of course, he may possibly escape a bite until the venom is played out, but with that recklessness, the chances are 100 to 1 against him. I have no regrets. After what he did to me, he deserves this and more. June 30th, 1930. Hurrah! My first step worked. Just heard casually from Dyson of Columbia that Moore had received some new blue-winged flies from Africa, and that he is badly puzzled over them. No words of any bites, but if I know Moore's slipshod ways, as I think I do, there will be one before long. August 27th, 1930. Letter from Morton in Cambridge. He says that Moore writes of feeling very run down, and tells of an insect bite on the back of his neck, from a curious new specimen that he received about the middle of June. Have I succeeded? Apparently Moore doesn't connect the bite with his weakness. If this is the real stuff, then Moore was bitten well within the insect's period of infectivity. September 12th, 1930. Victory. Another line from Dyson says that Moore is really in alarming shape. He now traces his illness to the bite, which he received around noon on June 19th, and is quite bewildered about the identity of the insect. He's trying to get in touch with the Neville Wayland Hall, who sent him the shipment. Of the 100 odd that I sent, about 25 seem to have reached him alive. Some escaped at the time of the bite, but several larvae have appeared from eggs laid since the time of mailing. He is, Dyson says, carefully incubating these larvae. When they mature, I suppose he'll identify the C.C. palpalis hybridization, but that won't do him much good now. He'll wonder, though, why the blue wings aren't transmitted by heredity. November 8th, 1930. Letter from half a dozen friends tell of Moore's serious illness. Dyson's came today. He says Moore's utterly at sea about the hybrids that came from the larvae and is beginning to think that the parents got their blue wings in some artificial way. Has to stay in bed most of the time now. No mention of using tripecaramide. February 13th, 1931. Not so good. Moore is sinking and seems to know no remedy, but I think he suspects me. Had a very chilly letter from Morton last month, which told nothing of Moore, and now Dyson writes, also rather constrainedly, that Moore is forming theories about the whole matter. He's been making a search for Wayland Hall by telegraph at London, Ucala, Nairobi, Mombasa, and other places, and of course finds nothing. I judge that he's told Dyson whom he suspects, but that Dyson doesn't believe it. Fear Morton does believe it. I see that I'd better lay plans for getting out of here and effacing my identity for good. What an end to a career that started out so well. More of Moore's work, but this time he's paying for it in advance. Believe I'll go to South Africa, and meanwhile, while quietly depositing funds there to credit of my new self, Frederick Naismith Mason of Toronto, Canada, broker in mining properties. We'll establish a new signature for identification. If I never have to take the step, I can easily retransfer the funds to my present self. August 15th, 1931. Half a year gone, and still suspense. Dyson and Morton, as well as several other friends, seem to have stopped writing me. Dr. James of San Francisco hears from Moore's friends now and then, and says Moore is in an almost continuous coma. He hasn't been able to walk since May. As long as he could talk, he complained about being cold. Now he can't talk, though it is thought he still has glimmers of consciousness. His breathing is short and quick, and can be heard some distance away. No question but that Trypanosoma gambiense is feeding on him. But he holds out better than the black men around here. 3 months and 8 days, finished Bada. And here, Moore is alive over a year after his biting. Heard rumors last month of an intense search around Yukala for Wayland Hall. Don't think I need to worry yet, though, for there's absolutely nothing in existence to link me to this business. October 7th, 1931. It's over at last. News in the Mombasa Gazette. Moore died September 20th after a series of trembling fits and with a temperature vastly below normal. So much for that. I said I'd get him, and I did. The paper had a 3-column report of his long illness and death, and of the futile search for Wayland Hall. Obviously, Moore was a bigger character in Africa than I had realized. The insect that bit him has now been fully identified from the surviving specimens and developed larvae, and the wing staining is also detected. It is universally realized that the flies were prepared and shipped with the intent to kill Moore. Moore, it appears, communicated certain suspicion to Dyson that the latter and the police are maintaining secrecy because of absence of proof. All of Moore's enemies are being looked at, and the Associated Press hints that an investigation, possibly involving an eminent physician now abroad, will follow. One thing at the very end of the report, undoubtedly cheap romancing of a yellow journalist, gives me a curious shudder in view of the legend of the blacks and the way the fly happened to go wild when Bada died. It seems that an odd incident occurred on the night of Moore's death. Dyson, having been aroused by the buzzing of a blue-winged fly, which immediately flew out the window, just before the nurse telephoned the death news from Moore's home, miles away in Brooklyn. But what concerns me most is the African end of the matter. People at Yukala remember the bearded stranger who typed the letter and sent the package, and the constabulary are combing the country for any blacks who may have carried him. I didn't use many, but if officers question the Ugandans who took me through the Kini jungle belt, I'll have more to explain than I like. It looks as if the time has come for me to vanish, so tomorrow, I believe, I'll resign and prepare to start for parts unknown. November 9th, 1931. Hard work and resignation acted on, but release came today. I didn't want to aggravate suspicion by decamping outright. Last week I heard from James about Moore's death, but nothing more than this in the papers. Those around him in New York seem rather reticent about details, though they all talk about a searching investigation. No word from any of my friends in the East. Moore must have spread some dangerous suspicions around before he lost consciousness, but there isn't an iota of proof he could have adduced. Still, I'm taking no chances. On Thursday I shall start from Mombasa, and when there, we'll take a steamer down the coast to Durban. After that I shall drop from sight, but soon afterwards the mining properties broker, Frederick Naismith Mason from Toronto, will turn up in Johannesburg. Let this be the end of my journal. If in the end I am not suspected, it will serve its original purpose after my death and reveal what would otherwise not be known. If, on the other hand, these suspicions do materialize and persist, it will confirm and clarify the vague charges and fill in many important and puzzling gaps. Of course, if danger comes my way, I shall have to destroy it. Well, Moore is dead, as he amply deserves to be. Now Dr. Thomas Sloanwhite is dead too, and when the bodily formerly belonging to Thomas Sloanwhite is dead, the public may have this record. 2. January 15th, 1932. A new year, and a reluctant reopening of this journal. This time I'm writing solely to relieve my mind, for it would be absurd to fancy that the case is not definitely closed. I am settled in the Val Hotel, Johannesburg, under my new name, and no one has so far challenged my identity. I've had some inclusive business talks to keep up my part as a mine broker, and believe I may actually work myself into that business. Later I shall go to Toronto and plant a few evidences for my fictitious past. But what is bothering me is an insect that invaded my room around noon today. Of course, I have had all sorts of nightmares about blue flies of late, but those were only to be expected in view of my prevailing nervous strain. This thing, however, was a waking actuality, and I am utterly at a loss to account for it. It buzzed around my bookshelf for fully a quarter of an hour and eluded every attempt to catch or kill it. The queerest thing was its color and aspect, for it had blue wings and was in every way a duplicate of my hybrid envoys of death. How could it possibly be one of these? In fact, I certainly don't know. I disposed of all hybrids, stained and unstained, that I didn't send to more, and I can't recall any instances of escape. Can this be wholly a hallucination? Or could any of these specimens that escaped in Brooklyn when Moore was bitten have found their way back to Africa? There was that absurd story of the blue fly that waked Dyson when Moore died, but after all, the survival and return of some of the things is not possible. It's perfectly plausible that the blue should stick to their wings, too, for the pigment I devised was almost as good as tattooing for permanence. By elimination, that would seem to be the only rational explanation for this thing. Though it is very curious that the fellow has come as far south as this. Possibly it's some hereditary homing instinct inherited in the CC strain. After all, that side of him belongs to South Africa. I must be on my guard against a bite. Of course, the original venom, if this is actually one of the flies that escaped from Moore, was worn out ages ago, but the fellow must have fed as he flew back from America, and he may well have come through Central Africa and picked up a fresh infectivity. Indeed, that's more probable than not, for the papalis half of his hereditary would naturally take him back to Uganda, and all the trypanosis germs. I have some of the triceramide left. I couldn't bear to destroy my medicine case, incriminating though it may be, but since reading upon the subject I am not so sure about the drug's action as I was. It gives one a fighting chance. Certainly it saved Gamba, but there's always a large probability of failure. It's devilish queer that this fly should have happened to come into my room, of all places in the wide expanse of Africa. Seems to strain coincidence to the breaking point. I suppose that if it comes again, I shall certainly kill it. I'm surprised that it escaped me today. Ordinarily, these fellows are extremely stupid and easy to catch. Can it be a pure illusion after all? Certainly the heat is getting me of late, as it never did before. Even up around Uganda. January 16th. Am I going insane? The fly came back this noon, and acted so anonymously that I can't make head or tail of it. Only delusion on my part could account for what buzzing pests seemed to do. It appeared from nowhere and went straight to my bookshelf, circling again and again to front a copy of Moore's Diptera of Central and Southern Africa. Now and then it would light on top or back of the volume, and occasionally it would dart towards me and retreat before I could strike at it with a folded paper. Such cunning is unheard of among the notoriously stupid African Diptera. For nearly half an hour I tried to get the cursed thing, but at last it darted out the window through a hole in the screen that I hadn't noticed. At times I fancied it deliberately mocked me by coming within reach of my weapon and then skillfully sidestepping as I struck out. I must keep a tight hold of my consciousness. January 17th. Either I am mad or the world is in the grip of sudden suspension of the laws of probability as we know them. That damnable fly came in from somewhere just before noon and commenced buzzing around the copy of Moore's Diptera on the shelf again. Again I tried to catch it, and again yesterday's experience was repeated. Finally the pest made for the open inkwell on my table and dipped itself in, just the legs and thorax, keeping its wings clear. Then it sailed up to the ceiling and lit, beginning to crawl around in a curved patch and leaving a trail of ink. After a time, it hopped a bit and made a single ink spot unconnected with the trail. Then it dropped squarely in front of my face and buzzed out of sight before I could get it. Something about this whole business struck me as monstrously sinister and abnormal, more so than I could explain myself. When I looked at the ink trail on the ceiling from different angles, it seemed more and more familiar to me, and it dawned on me suddenly that it formed an absolutely perfect question mark. What device could be more maligned appropriately? It is a wonder that I did not faint. So far the hotel attendants have not noticed. I have not seen the fly this afternoon and evening, but I'm keeping my inkwell securely closed. I think my extermination of more must be preying on me and giving me morbid hallucinations. Perhaps there is no fly at all. January 18th. Into what strange hell of living nightmare am I plunged? What occurred today is something which could not normally happen, and yet a hotel attendant has seen the marks on the ceiling and concedes their reality. About 11 o'clock this morning, as I am writing on a manuscript, something darted down into the inkwell for a second and flashed aloft again before I could see what it was. Looking up, I saw that hellish fly on the ceiling as it had been before, crawling along and tracing another trail of curves and turns. There was nothing I could do, but I folded a newspaper in readiness to get the creature if it should fly near enough. When it had made several turns on the ceiling, it flew into a dark corner and disappeared. And as I looked upward at the doubly defaced plastering, I saw that the new ink trail was that of a huge and unmistakable figure 5. For a time, I was almost unconscious from a wave of nameless menace for which I could not fully account. When I summoned up my resolution and took an active step, going out to the chemist's shop, I purchased some gum and other things necessary for preparing a sticky trap. Also, a duplicated inkwell. Returning to my room, I filled the inkwell with the sticky mixture and set it where the old one had been, leaving it open. When I tried to concentrate my mind on some reading, about 3 o'clock, I heard the accursed insect again and saw it circling around the new inkwell. It descended to the sticky surface, but did not touch it, and afterwards sailed straight towards me, retreating before I could hit it. Then it went to the bookshelf and circled around Moore's treatise. There is something profound and diabolical about the way the intruder hovers near the book. The worst part was the last. Leaving Moore's book, the insect flew over to the open window and began beating itself rhythmically against the wire screen. There would be a series of beats, and then a series of equal length, and another pause, and so on. Something about this performance held me motionless for a couple of moments, but after that I went over to the window and tried to kill the noxious thing. As usual, no use. It merely flew across the room to a lamp and began beating the same tattoo on the stiff cardboard shade. I felt a vague desperation and proceeded to shut all the doors, as well as the windows whose screens had their perceptible hole. It seems very necessary to kill this persistent being, whose hounding was rapidly unsettling my mind. Then, unconsciously counting, I began to notice that each of its series of beats contained just 5 strokes. 5, the same number that thing had traced in ink on the ceiling in the morning. Could there be any conceivable connection? The notion was maniacal, for that would argue a human intellect and knowledge of written figures in the hybrid fly. A human intellect did not take one back to the most primitive legends of Uganda blacks. And yet there was that infernal cleverness in eluding me as contrasted with the normal stupidity of the beast. As I laid aside my folded paper and sat down in growing horror, the insect buzzed aloft and disappeared through a hole in the ceiling, where the radiator pipe went to the room above. The departure did not soothe me, for my mind had started on a train of wild and terrible reflections. If this fly had a human intelligence, where did that intelligence come from? Was there any truth in the native notions that these creatures acquired the personality of their victims after the latter's death? If so, whose personality did this fly bear? I had reasoned out that it must be one of those who escaped from Moore at the time he was bitten. Was this the envoy of death which had bitten Moore? If so, what did it want with me? What did it want with me anyway? In a cold perspiration, I remembered the actions of the fly that had bitten Bata when Bata died. Had its own personality been displaced by that of its dead victim? Then there was that sensational news account of the fly that wakened Dyson when Moore died. As for that fly that was hounding me, could it be that vindictive human personality drove it on? How it hovered around Moore's book. I refused to think any farther than that. All at once I began to feel sure that the creature was indeed infected, and in the most virulent way. With a malign deliberation so evident in every act, it must surely have charged itself on purpose with the deadliest bacilla in all Africa. My mind, thoroughly shaken, was now taking the thing's human qualities for granted. I now telephoned the clerk and asked for a man to stop up the radiator pipe hole and other possible chinks in my room. I spoke of being tormented by flies, and he seemed to be quite sympathetic. When the man came, I showed him the ink marks on the ceiling, which he recognized without difficulty. So they are real. The remembrance to the question mark and the figure 5 puzzled and fascinated him. In the end, he stopped up all the holes he could find and mended the window screen so that I can now keep both windows open. He evidently thought me a bit eccentric, especially since no insects were in sight while he was there, but I am past minding that. So far, the fly has not appeared this evening. God knows what it is, what it wants, or what will become of me. January 19th. I am utterly engulfed in horror. The thing has touched me. Something monstrous and demonic is at work around me, and I am a helpless victim. In the morning, when I returned from breakfast, that winged fiend from hell brushed into the room over my head and began beating itself against the window screen as it did yesterday. This time, though, each series of beats contained only 4 strokes. I rushed to the window and tried to catch it, but it escaped as usual and flew over to Moore's treatise, where it buzzed around mockingly. Its vocal equipment is limited, but I noticed that its spells of buzzing came in groups of 4. By this time I was certainly mad, for I called out to it, "More, more, for God's sake, what do you want?" When I did so, the creature suddenly ceased its circling, flew towards me, and made a low, graceful dip in the air, somehow suggestive of a bow. Then it flew back to the book. At least, I seem to see it do all this, though I am trusting my senses no longer. And then the worst thing happened. I had left my door open, hoping the monster would leave if I could not catch it. But about 11:30, I shut the door, concluding it had gone. Then I settled down to read. Just at noon, I felt a tickle on the back of my neck, but when I put my hand up, nothing was there. In a moment, I felt the tickling again, and before I could move, the nameless spawn of hell sailed into view from behind, did another of those mocking, graceful dips in the air, and flew out through the keyhole, which I had never dreamed was large enough to allow its passage. That thing had touched me. I could not doubt it. It had touched me without injuring me, and then I remembered, in a sudden cold fright, that Moore had been bitten on the back of the neck at noon. No invasion since then, but I have stuffed all the keyholes with paper, and shall have a folded paper ready for use when I open the door to leave or enter. January 20th. I cannot yet believe fully in the supernatural, yet I fear none the less that I am lost. The business is too much for me. Just before noon today, the devil appeared outside the window and repeated its beating operations, but this time in a series of 3s. When I went to the window, it flew off out of sight. I still have resolution enough to take one more defensive step. Removing both window screens, I coated them with my sticky preparation, the one I used in the inkwell, outside and inside, and set them back in place. If that creature attempts another tattoo, it will be its last. Rest of the day in peace. Can I weather this experience without becoming a maniac? January 21st. On board train for Bloemfontein. I am routed. The thing is winning. It has a diabolical intelligence against which all my devices are powerless. It appeared outside my window this morning, but did not touch the sticky screen. Instead, it sheared off without lighting and began buzzing around in circles, 2 at a time, followed by a pause in the air. After several of these performances, it flew off out of sight over the roofs of the city. My nerves are just about at the breaking point, for these suggestions of numbers are capable of a hideous interpretation. Monday the thing dwelt on the figure 5. Tuesday it was 4. Wednesday it was 3. Now today it is 2. 5, 4, 3, 2. What can this be save for some monstrous and unthinkable counting off of days? For what purpose only the evil powers of the universe can know. I spent all afternoon packing and arranging about my trunks, and now I have taken the night express for Bloemfontein. Flight might be useless, but what else can I do? January 22nd. Settled at the Orange Hotel, Bloemfontein. A comfortable and excellent place, but the horror followed me. I had shut all doors and windows, stopped all the keyholes, looked for any possible chinks, and pulled down all the shades. But just before noon, I heard a dull tap on one of the window screens. I waited, and after a long pause, another tap came. A second pause, and still another single tap. Raising the shade, I saw that accursed fly, as I expected. It described one large, slow circle in the air, and then flew off out of sight. I was left as weak as a rag, and had to rest on the couch. This was clearly the burden of the monster's present message. 1 tap, 1 circle. Did this mean one more day for me before some unthinkable doom? I ought to flee again, or entrench myself here by sealing up the room. After an hour's rest, I felt able to act, and ordered a large reserve supply of canned and packaged food, also linen and towels, sent in. Tomorrow I shall not, under any circumstances, open any crevices of a window or door. When the food and linen came, the black looked at me queerly, but I no longer care how eccentric or insane I must appear. I am hounded by powers worse than the ridiculous of mankind. Having received my supplies, I went over every square millimeter of wall and stopped up every microscopic opening I could find. At least I feel able to get real sleep. Handwriting here becomes irregular, nervous, and very difficult to decipher. January 23rd. It's just before noon, and I feel that something very terrible is about to happen. Didn't sleep as late as I expected, even though I got almost no sleep on the train the night before. Up early, and have had trouble getting concentrated on anything, reading or writing. That slow, deliberate counting off of days is too much for me. I don't know which has gone wild. Nature or my head. Until about 11, I did very little except walk up and down the room. Then I heard a rustling among the food packages brought in yesterday, and that demonic fly crawled out before my eyes. I grabbed something flat and made passes at the thing despite my panicked fear, but with no more effect than usual. As I advanced, that blue-winged horror retreated as usual to the table where I had piled my books and lit for a second on Moore's Diptery of Central and Southern Africa. Then, as I followed it, it flew over to the mantel clock and lit on the dial near the figure 12. Before I could think up another move, it began to crawl around the dial very slowly and deliberately in the direction of the hands. It passed under the minute hand, curved down and up, passed under the hour hand, and finally came to a stop exactly at 12. As it hovered there, it fluttered its wings with a buzzing noise. Is this a portent of some sort? I am getting as superstitious as the blacks. The hour is now little after 11. Is 12 the end? I have just one last resort, brought to mind through utter desperation. Wish I had thought of it before, recalling that my medicine case contains both of the substances necessary to generate chlorine gas. I resolved to fill the room with that lethal vapor, asphyxiate the fly, and while protecting myself with ammonia-sealed handkerchief tied over my face. Fortunately, I have a good supply of ammonia. This crude mask will probably neutralize the acrid chlorine fumes till the insect is dead, or at least helpless enough to crush. But I must be quick. How can I be sure that thing will not suddenly dart for me before my preparations are complete? I ought not to be stopped to write this journal. Later. Both chemicals, hydrochloric acid and manganese dioxide, on the table, all ready to mix. I've tied the handkerchief over my nose and mouth, and have a bottle of ammonia ready to keep it soaked until the chlorine is gone. Have battened down both windows, but I don't like the actions of that hybrid demon. It stays on the clock. It's very slowly crawling around back from the 12 mark to meet the gradually advancing minute hand. Is this to be my last entry in this journal? It would be useless to try to deny what I suspect. Too often a grain of incredible truth lurks behind the wildest and most fantastic of legends. Is the personality of Henry Moore trying to get at me through this blue-winged devil? Is this the fly that bit him, and that in consequence absorbed his consciousness when he died? If so, and if it bites me, will my own personality displace Moore's and enter that buzzing body when I die of the bite later? Perhaps, though, I need not die, even if it gets me. There's always a chance with tripceramide, and I regret nothing. Moore had to die, be the outcome what it will. Slightly later. The fly has paused on the clock dial near the 45 mark. It is now 11:30. I am saturating the handkerchief over my face with ammonia and keeping the bottle handy for further applications. This will be the final entry before I mix the acid and manganese and liberate the chlorine. I ought not to be losing time, but it steadies me to get this down on paper. Before this record, I have lost all my reason long ago. The fly seems to be getting restless, and the minute hand is approaching it. Now, for the chlorine. End of journal. On Sunday, January 24th, 1932, after repeated knocking had failed to gain any response from the eccentric man in room 303 of Orange Hotel, a black attendant entered with a pass key and at once fled shrieking downstairs to tell the clerk what he had found. The clerk, after notifying the police, summoned the manager, and later accompanied by Constable DeWitt, Coroner Bogard and Dr. Van Keulen to the fatal room. The occupant lay dead on the floor, his face upward and bound with a handkerchief, which smelled strongly of ammonia. Under this covering, the features showed an expression of stark, utter fear, which transmitted itself to the observers. On the back of the neck, Dr. Van Keulen found a virulent insect bite, dark red, with a purple ring around it, which suggested a tsetse fly or something less innocuous. An examination indicated that the death must be due to heart failure, induced by sheer fright rather than to the bite, though a subsequent autopsy indicated that the germ of trypanosomias had been introduced into the system. On the table were several objects: a worn leather blank book containing the journal just described, a pen, writing pad, and open inkwell, a doctor's medicine case with the initials TS marked in gold, bottles of ammonia and hydrochloric acid, and a tumbler about a quarter full of black manganese dioxide. The ammonia bottle demanded a second look because something beside the fluid seemed to be in it. Looking closer, Coroner Bogard saw that the alien occupant was a fly. Seems to be some sort of hybrid with vague CC affiliations. Its wings, showing faintly blue despite actions of strong ammonia, were a complete puzzle. Something about it waked a faint memory of a newspaper reading in Dr. Van Keulen, a memory of which the journal was soon to confirm. Its lower part seemed to have been stained with ink, so thoroughly that even the ammonia had not bleached them. Possibly it had fallen at one time into the inkwell, though the wings were untouched. But how had it managed to fall into a narrow-necked ammonia bottle? It was as if the creature had deliberately crawled in and committed suicide. But the strangest thing of all was that Constable DeWitt noticed on the smooth white ceiling overhead as his eyes roved about curiously. At his cry, the other three followed his gaze. Even Dr. Van Keulen, who had for some time been fumbling through the worn leather book with an expression of mixed horror, fascination, and incredulity. The thing on the ceiling was a series of shaky, straggling ink tracks, such as might have been made by the crawling of some ink-drenched insect. At once, everyone thought of the stains on the fly so oddly found in the ammonia bottle. But these were no ordinary ink tracks, even at first glance, revealing something hauntingly familiar about them, and closer inspection brought gasps of startled wonder from all four observers. Coroner Bogard instinctively looked around the room to see if there were any conceivable instruments or arrangements of piled-up furniture which could make it possible for those straggling marks to have been drawn by human agency. Finding nothing of the sort, he resumed his curious and almost awestruck upward glance. For beyond a doubt, these inky smudges formed definite letters of the alphabet. Letters coherently arranged in English words. The doctor was the first to make them out clearly, and the others listened breathlessly as he recited the insane-sounding message so incredibly scrawled on a place no human hand could reach. See my journal. It got me first. I died. Then I saw I was in it. The blacks are right. Strange powers in nature. Now I will drown what is left. Presently, amidst the puzzled hush that followed, Dr. Van Keulen commenced reading aloud from the worn leather journal. This has been Winged Death by H.P. Lovecraft with Hazel Heald.